You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 534, our coverage, I guess the complete in our coverage of the Shadows of Starlight comic book series. Tonight, we're going to be taking a look at issues 3 and 4 and talking about, the importance of these issues, the importance of the series as a whole, how much we love this series, because all of this is the precursor to our breakdown of Eye of Darkness, which you can expect next week. And by we, I mean Lauren, who is also with us tonight. Lauren, in the comfy chair tonight. Welcome to the show, Lauren. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yes, I am in the comfy chair. Let's see if my cat behaves himself
Hey,
because
Rocky.
he's not used to me in the comfy chair. He just jumped up here like right when you started. But yeah, I'm good. I'm excited that I'm comfortable and not in my stupid office chair that I used to be in.
We were joking before we came on the air. It's like reading time with Lauren, and like I feel like I need a little mat or something to sit down on, crisscross applesauce style, and just let you read me a book to bed or at the library or whatever it is. So
well, and it's funny that you said that because that's exactly what I was going for. So it sounds like I've achieved that.
Yeah, you could also mix in like a smoking jacket, a couple cigars from time to time.
Yeah,
a little cup or a glass of bourbon would be nice too. But that'd be a good look. So let's work on that just for the aesthetics.
Well, and I've got the cat too. If he sits still, so
Right,
that also completes that whole image.
It does. Yep. So thank you guys for joining us. I think so. Technically, this is now the second show of the year that we're doing, and I want to say thank you to everybody that, of course, came out to the show that we did last week. Certainly, everybody that's in the live chat tonight. Thank you guys for being here, and a special thank you to all of our Patreon members. So, especially our now part of the tribe members, Rob, who's in the chat tonight. Hey, Rob. Mike Borda, Lauren, Dante, Riss Bayless, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh C, Jacob, Reader Reborn, and then our Delusions of Grandeur tier members, which are Rod, CJ, Alex, Steve, and Das. If you guys are interested in signing up for Patreon, you can go to cantinacast.com/Patreon and sign up for as little as $2 there. There's a wealth of content in the backlog that you guys can take advantage of, listen to, watch, over the years, and a lot of it is kind of evergreen. Some of it's kind of cool to go back and listen to our thoughts and opinions on stuff that we were speculating on, but some of it is evergreen in the sense that you can always get something out of it, even though it's 2-3 years down the road. Again, a lot of stuff out there for Patreon members, so we'd appreciate that. And if this is your first time joining us, because I know we've picked up a lot of recent viewers this year already. And thank you guys for being here. And if you're interested, head out to cantinacast.com/YouTube, like, subscribe, so that you guys don't miss an episode. We cover everything. Tonight, we're going to be covering comics. We've got some book coverage. We do, of course, all of the breakdowns of television, movies, whenever those come out, video games, you name it. We've got everything covered, and we've been doing this for a very long time. So thank you to all of our new supporters, everyone that's joined here recently. We definitely appreciate the support and hope you guys are finding what you like and what you want to see on the show. Please let us know if you're not. All right, let's talk about programming notes before we get into the main show. Lauren, I'm going to kick it over to you because I know you just released a Jedi Novel Archive video, and it's similar to what we're talking about tonight.
Yes, it's actually the same thing, but it's a little bit more of just a here's what you need to know version. So not quite as detailed as we're going to get tonight, but I did cover Shadows of Starlight 1 through 4 all in the same video where I just kind of go through and give my general thoughts and just like the highlights of those 4 issues.
Yeah, and I think you clocked in at just around 35-40 minutes. I think it's
yes. Yeah. So 4 issues, 35 minutes. So
yeah, I actually watched it. It was a good recap, especially considering that we were going into this episode like, oh yeah, this is great. So
did you watch it to help study?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was my homework ahead of this show. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for just kind of high level stuff, Lauren's really good about doing that. And then we're going to continue to break down ad nauseum comics and books, especially in the upcoming months with everything going on in phase 3 here on the main show, which will be Thursdays at 9 p.m. Central. You'll get a lot more than you will with the shows that she's doing. So however you want to take your medicine, we're there for you. Also, this Sunday, we're doing two shows. So we've got the Way Station. So Ed and I will be back, first show of the new year. And we're going to be taking a look at 2024. So looking at all the stuff that's been scheduled, at least we think is going to be coming out here soon for 2024, talking about when we expect those and just kind of giving our thoughts and opinions about that stuff. And then afterwards, Jonesy and I will be on for the Patreon show because there was an announcement that was made here this week that we aren't getting a season 4 of Mando, but we are getting a Mandalorian movie written and directed by Jon Favreau. We expect everybody to be back. So Jonesy and I are going to be talking about pros and cons of that, maybe as well as speculating on what we could expect to see now that we've had a chance to wrap up season 3 of Mando. Ahsoka's been announced or finalized. And oh, by the way, they kind of slipped in the season 2 of Ahsoka as well. So that got greenlit. So I think there's probably a conscious decision that both of those were in the news release or the press release. So all that will be talked about for our Patreon members Sunday after that. And then finally next week, as I alluded to in the opening, Lauren and I are going to be kicking off the first of 3 episodes dedicated to Eye of Darkness, which is the first adult novel released as part of Phase 3. You heard us talk about it. You're going to hear us allude to a lot of stuff tonight on this show. You heard us do that with the first 2 episodes. And we're going to try to stay spoiler free, but some of this, we're getting so close to, mixing and mingling that it's hard to keep all that straight. So apologies in advance if we do, but I think we'll do our best to make sure that we don't spoil anything too major. But there may be some, we may be alluding to some things that you'll see in the comic book or the book based on the comics.
It does kill you to not say spoilers, so.
I know, it does.
Hopefully you'll be okay.
On top of that too, just as a quick aside, we've gotten the ARCs, the advanced reader copies for the next 2 books have already started circulating. Jonesy got his. I'm expecting mine this week, hopefully, if not, probably next week. And so we'll be covering that. On top of that, I started reading. I finally got a chance to read the first 3 issues of High Republic from Marvel that takes place in Phase 3. And holy bananas, that's really good too. Like, we're going to have to do something with that because there's some really good stuff that they're doing in that, especially if you're a Lorna D fan. Sorry if I don't want to spoil too much, but if you're a Lorna D fan and been wondering where the heck has she been, especially after Tempest Runner, that comic is super good, written by Kevin Scott. So all that to say, tons and tons of stuff still in the future that we've got planned here. The Phase 3 coverage and the High Republic coverage isn't going to go away anytime soon. So, all right. Anything else? Did I miss anything? I think that's everything.
I think you covered it.
Yeah. All right. Ash, where's Avar? Is she okay? Is she safe? Yes. More on that coming soon.
That's a complicated question.
It's a very complicated question. All right. Let's take a look at Shadows of Starlight, number 3 first up. And I'm going to add, we've got some visuals here that we put together. So just quickly off the top, I want to talk about these 3 issues 1, 2, and 3. We're going to cover 3 tonight, of course. But then I want to talk about 4 because there's something they did very interesting with this series. The first 3, why is that still showing up? The first three issues of this comic series are written kind of in your typical comic book format. In other words, there's a narrative that's going on. You've got an editor that's, putting in bubbles and boxes and editor notes, and all that seems very, objective. It's not opinionated in some way, but they did a really interesting thing that I actually really love with issue 4. It's almost written from the perspective as though the editor were a member of the Nihil or Marchion Ro himself. And we'll get into some examples of that in a little bit. I've got some screenshots of stuff. We're going to be talking about some of the entries as they set up each of the sections within the comic book. But I guess your thoughts quickly on that change, because I think this is the first time we've seen anything like that. It happens in comics all the time. Honestly, it's not, novel to comic books in general, but it was the first time that I've noticed it, at least in a Star Wars comic.
Yeah, it did feel a little bit different to me how even aside from just the last one being from Marchion's perspective or more of a Nihil perspective, I mean, those other 3 issues were also from different characters' perspectives. So it felt like there was a lot of jumping around. And then there was also a lot of time jumps too. But I understand why they did it that way because there's a lot of ground to cover and you've got 4 issues to cover it. So time jumps, I think, were pretty necessary as we're changing the perspectives up. But yeah, it did feel a little bit different, just kind of the reading experience of from issue to issue rather than getting a continuation of the issue before it. You're kind of picking up a new plot thread.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah, and hopefully we get some more opportunities for them to do some of this stuff. I think Daniel Jose Older has kind of poked around in this just a little bit with the comics that he's doing over at IDW, but for the Marvel line, at least, this was the first time that I had seen that. So, so we've got the cover up right now of 3. You clearly see Bell Zettifar on there. You can see him holding his braid. So this is one of the moments that happens, of course, in this comic. This comic again is written by Charles Soule, all 4 issues of it. And Phil Noto has been doing the covers, and the artist has been Jethro Morales, which I thought he does a really good job. There's some panels that are amazing, and some of the big layouts, like the big 2-page stuff that he does, is really good as well. For anyone again who's not aware, if you're tuning in, coming in halfway here, these 4 issues cover the year that leads up to Eye of Darkness, right? So you'll see, like Lauren mentioned, throughout both the first 3 issues and even in the 4th issue. We keep getting these flashbacks. We started as far back as 1 year, and then we jump to like, 6 months before, 3 months before, 2 months before. And so it's really filling in a lot of the blank space that happens in that 1 year. And for that reason, I think you and I both agree that this does feel a little bit different. Like, with the comics in the past, it was more context. I wouldn't call it filler, but it certainly allowed you to kind of flesh out the narrative of the main books, especially the main adult novels. And so it felt like it was optional reading, but this one does feel required in a lot of ways. I think you don't necessarily have to, well, I don't want to contradict myself. It feels like it is necessary to read, but at the same time, like we've said, I think George Mann does a good job in Eye of Darkness to at least give you the bits and pieces that you need for the story to work. But man, this really recontextualizes so much of what we see in Eye of Darkness. I guess, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think you actually do have to read it. And I usually try to not say that
Yeah.
because, you don't have to do anything. But I mean, like this one, I do kind of feel like if you don't read this series, then, and I always tell this story because I feel like I'm an example of like the consequences of not reading this is when I started Eye of Darkness, I was annoyed that there were questions that I felt like needed to be answered that weren't answered. And they were answered in this comic. So because of that, I'm like, if you don't read the comic, you are going to be missing something and you're going to be like, why is this not being answered? And it's like, well, it was answered. You were supposed
Yeah.
to read the comic first. So,
Yeah, the comic and all Jedi walk their own path as well, right? I mean, there's a huge piece that happens in that, and even is mentioned in this comic book as well in issue 3. So it just feels different going into phase 3. Like it does feel much more connected, and all of this stuff is starting to feel very important, very necessary for you to truly understand what's going on, because it's pretty complex at this point.
yeah, I mean, I feel like what they're doing is with phases 1 and 2, it felt like they were telling different stories with different media. But I feel like with phase 3, they're using all different kinds of media to tell the same story just from different angles.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
kind of hard to separate one of them from the
Yeah.
others.
No, that makes sense. It makes sense. Okay, well, let's get to the comic. So we open up with this is issue 3. This takes place about 5 days after the fall of Starlight Beacon. And one of the things I love about all of the issues is most of them start in this time period. Even the 4th issue, even though it's from the perspective of the Nihil, it still starts about a year after. And what I love about the way they've opened up each of these comics is you have a better understanding of the scale and the perspective of what it means for a space station the size of Starlight Beacon to have crashed on Irem. And so I've got a picture up here right now. This is not to scale, right? I mean, it's so far out there, but it's great to see all of that because when the Fallen Star ends, we all understand the loss that was there, right? It's very tragic. It's a very somber, sordid kind of ending to that novel. But seeing it visually now through the comics, I think just gives it more weight, and certainly gives us a better sense of just how tragic this thing was, especially if you coming in from phase 2 and you were part of the whole Irem thing and all the stuff that was going on there. It's much more poignant and much more significant. But at this point, we open up here with Bell and Elzar, and they're kind of sitting there talking. Again, the Jedi protocols have been initiated, meaning the Jedi have to go. And 5 days after Starlight Beacon, the Jedi are booking it out of there. Everybody's leaving. They're heading back to Coruscant at this point. And they're technically going home, right? They're all referring to Coruscant and the Jedi Temple as home. But for Bell, which I didn't really, I love this part of it. for Bell, I don't know that he's ever felt like he had a home outside of what he had on Elfrona, when it used to be Ember and Loden and Porter and Adira Stokes, right? That core team that we grew up with, if you will, in Light of the Jedi and the story that was there. That's his home. And if you really think about it, so much of that is gone. Ember's not with him, to kind of, I don't know if we've covered it yet or not, but Ember ended up going with Porter Ingle, who then passed them on to Adira Stokes, which we'll find out here in just a few minutes. I know it's a very sensitive topic for you, so we'll come back to that in a little bit. And
Not something I can relate to.
right. And then you got Loden, of course, who's dead. We all know that. And then Porter Ingle, who's missing behind the occlusion zone. And then Adira Stokes, who was attacked by one of the Nameless and has been, on life support for all intents and purposes here since then. So for him, he's really questioning, like, what is home for me?
Well, and I mean, they were his family, and his family has been broken up pretty much. And I mean, all of his formative years were spent there. So, I mean, to go through, I mean, all of his training, all of those big kind of learning moments that he's gone through as a Padawan, and then, I mean, not only are you about to become a knight, but your space that you're comfortable with, that is also taken away from you. So he seems like he just feels very kind of just drifting around in more ways than one.
Yeah. And I think, and the one thing that the key takeaway from this opening scene is that it's very clear that for Bell, he's not done looking for Burryaga, right? Even though the odds of him living are astronomical, he still wants to stick around. He still wants to at least give it a shot, because he feels like he didn't get a chance to do that, right? It's a second chance to go after somebody who he cares about and loves, who went missing, like Loden Greatstorm, and he feels kind of guilty that they didn't do more. He didn't do more in that search for Loden Greatstorm, and even probably feels like, hey, had I done this, maybe we could have prevented his death, right? And so he's very obsessed. I'm going to call it obsessed with looking for Burryaga. But then we have a scene in here, and I don't have it up right now. This is kind of the handing over of Burryaga's lightsaber that Elzar has been holding on to. We do get a sense that Elzar's, I wouldn't say shaming him, but he is really questioning, like, is this really what you want to do? Like, the odds of him being alive are astronomical. You really need to come back home. I understand what you're trying to do, but it almost feels like they're, it feels like a double standard. Let's just be clear.
Yeah.
But I know you've got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a double standard. I remember when I was reading this for the first time, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, Bell is just hoping that his friend isn't dead. I feel like that's not crazy to hope for. So I do feel like Elzar is being a little bit hard on him in this case, because Elzar would do the exact same thing for Avar. I mean, he would do it even not just for Avar. I mean, even if it was like Orla or something like that, I feel like he would do the same thing.
Yeah. And we see some of that. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but we can see clearly when we get to Tales or Eye of Darkness that Elzar does have his own obsessions. I mean, it's Avar. Like, he's in search of Avar throughout that book, trying to make sure he wants to reconnect with her. We saw it in the last issue. I think it was in issue 2, right? We got to see clearly to what great lengths he would go through, but then for some reason he's not able to kind of disconnect or see the distinction or the lack of distinction between what he's doing and what Burryaga is doing here, right? I've got some more thoughts on this a little bit later, because I'm starting to feel like maybe this is part of the attachments, as 2 examples that maybe play out later and get us to the point where we get to the Phantom Menace, where attachments are completely forbidden, almost in any capacity. But these 2 folks could be cautionary tales for why the Jedi have that kind of perspective later down the road. The other thing I kind of want to mention here as well is, once in the next panel here, I'll go to the next one here. In this one, there's a time jump. We clearly have a time jump. So Elzar takes off, Burryaga stays there, and we have a time jump where, he goes and has this entire journey to go find Burryaga, and all of that is covered in the story, All Jedi Walk Their Own Path, which is from the Tales of Light and Life anthology book that came out. Lauren and I did an episode on this already, so if you haven't had a chance, you can go back and watch that, or watch the video. It was episode 531, but it really jumps to them resurfacing. Again, sorry, spoilers, but them resurfacing from where Burryaga had been the entire time. And there's a little editor's note in here that Charles Soule put in here. It says, to see where Bell rescued Burry, read all the Jedi walk their own path, etc. What he forgot to say was, oh, and by the way, go watch Albert and Lauren's breakdown of the story in episode 531. That's okay, Charles. It's, it was an oversight. We totally get it. So.
Yeah, it's fine. He couldn't have known.
He wouldn't have known. But it was cool to see some of the characters from that storyline. In this one, we got to see the Queen Ziri, the main ship that they're on here. You can kind of see that there. There was Gorge, which was the Twi'lek. There was Nellie, that was one of the, I don't know what race she was. I forget now. It looks like a dark elf, but that's not Star Wars. But we got to see some of the characters from that short story, animated, or I guess drawn in this comic, which was kind of cool. But of course, at this point, they all kind of thank each other, and they're very grateful for everything that Bell has done for them. They were already on board with the idea of who Burryaga was through Bell's efforts and just talking about him, right? And that's all covered in that short story. But then at the very end, there was an interesting piece in here where now that Bell has found Burry, right? That mission's over. He makes the comment about he's going to, quote, make the Nihil pay for what they have done. Right? All the losses, everything, right? He's kind of looking at it in totality, and he wants to make them pay. And to me, that does, sound like revenge, right? In a way. And I don't know, what was your take on that? Did it sound a little more menacing than he probably wanted to, or how did you take that when you read it?
I mean, you're probably right. It's not the Jedi way to like seek revenge. But on the other hand, it's like, well, somebody's got to go after the Nihil, because they're just going to keep doing what they're doing if nobody does. And if they face consequences, isn't that making them pay? So I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little bit too easy on Bell in this case, but I feel like it could kind of go either way. Either, we need to stop them and we want them to have consequences for what they did, or we need to get revenge. It's like a slightly different interpretation, but one of them seems like it could be in line with what the Jedi want and the other one's not. So
yeah,
it's kind of a toss up.
Yeah. And justice is one thing. And I think that's where the Jedi usually try to side on. They try to kind of walk that line of, oh, this is just justice. We are servants of ensuring that injustice doesn't happen. But just the way he said it, I don't remember if I got that or not, as far as the, yeah, it's time for them to pay. That's the exact quote, right? And you can see Burryaga on there.
Face is like, oh, good grief.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, here we go.
Get ready.
Yep. And this plays into this comic a little bit later, because we see the obsession with this, right? It becomes a white whale for him in terms of, ensuring that someone is doing something to find the Nihil at this point and bring them to justice, or bring them to revenge, or exact revenge on them for everything that they've done. So from here they leave. Of course, Burryaga is not really happy about that. Oh, sorry, I want to go to the comments real quick. So Jeff chimed in, said, he said, I have read and loved Eye of Darkness. Have not read this series yet, but your episode on it has me hyped. Definitely seems like it will enrich an already great novel. So thank you, Jeff, for that. And he also says Bell's search for Burry is also pretty great in Tales of Light and Life. Yes, I would. I think you and I both said it's definitely worth reading. There's some really great moments in there, and you get more Bell and Loden's relationship in that book. So
yeah, and even aside from just like finding out how he got Burry and all that, it's just so great in terms of the way that Loden was teaching Bell and those flashbacks that you get. There's just so much more to that story than just finding out what happened to Burryaga, which is why I love it so much.
Yep. Okay. We then go to Coruscant, and at this point we are. Let's see, I think we are 2 months 2 months after the fall of Starlight Beacon. So we're on Coruscant. We're at the Jedi Temple. Bell and Burryaga get off, and immediately Ember runs out. I didn't get a picture of it, but Ember runs out, and he's super excited. But he's also got questions about, like, wait, why are you here? You were supposed to be with Porter, and Porter's missing. And we come to find out that Porter had given, Indira was on life support. You can see her clearly in this kind of like spider-looking chair. She's talking about how she's been being brought back to better health. I've got some questions around whether or not she lost her powers or her ability to connect with the Force in the same ways that she did before, because she says they're working to, quote, counteract the effects of the Nameless. So I want your thoughts on that. But in short, Ember is with Indira because Porter felt like, hey, she needs a buddy, and what better to help bring somebody along on their road to recovery than an animal. So, and Ember, of course, is, she's amazing. So,
Yeah. Okay, I have 2 things.
yeah,
So,
go ahead.
first of all, Indira, I'm wondering if my fear is, thinking about what happened with Aslan Rel after his encounter with the Nameless and the state that that left him in, I'm wondering if Indira might be having some psychological effects as well.
Hmm.
I'm hoping that obviously, like, she looks she's in the chair, but she looks like she's in good spirits for the most part. So maybe she's not quite as bad as Aslan Rel was, but that would be my concern is she also okay emotionally in terms of the effect? And if her connection to the force has changed, I could see that having some kind of effect like it did for Aslan. So I think
Yeah.
that remains to be seen. But yeah, with Ember, okay. This is what and I was saying this in my video too, because I was like, okay, if I let somebody pet sit my dog and then that person went missing and there's a war going on. Who cares about Marchion Ro? I don't care.
Right.
I would be like, I need to find my dog.
Give me my dog, right? Don't I didn't allow you to pass him on. It's not like a good luck charm.
Yeah. Like if I entrust you with the care of my animal, like I'm believing that you're handling it. Don't just give my
Right.
pet to somebody else.
Yeah. Here, take this baby. I'm tired of watching this thing.
Yeah.
No, those are good points coming from a pet mama as yourself. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like the list of people that have survived the Nameless is pretty short, right? So we don't know. To your point, like we don't know what the lasting effects are. So yeah, there could be something mentally going on there, psychologically. Clearly, there's something physical. She's not able to walk on her own, right? So she's almost an invalid in that regard. So we'll see. It's very interesting to see how this kind of plays out, throughout the rest of Phase 3 with Adira Strokes. I thought she was gone. Like I didn't realize she even lived, honestly. So kind of cool that she was able to kind of pull through that.
And she does have probably a little bit more support than Aslan Rel had because time has passed. It seems like a little bit more is known now than back in phase 2 when Aslan Rel had that issue. So I'm hoping that if she has a good chance of recovery, then maybe that's going to be more likely to happen in this day and age.
Yeah. She feels like she probably was more grounded in the light than Aslan was too. So there may be something there where she's not obsessive like he is, right? There's a whole reason outside of the effects of the Nihil or the Nameless. There are some like, psychological reasons as to why Azamrel is who he is by the time we get to, this part of the timeline. But
Mhm.
the other thing that Adira does is she tells Bell and Burryaga like, "Hey, the Guardian protocols are in effect, and guess what? You are getting knighted." And so they get really excited about this, right? That suddenly that they've gone through their trials, even if they technically didn't go through traditional trials. I think living through all the events up through Fallen Star probably is enough to kind of quantify and justify you being knighted at that point. But I think also at this point they really don't even care. Like we saw that clearly in the first issue where they're knighting pretty much kids, right? At about the same age as like Ahsoka, right? I mean, 10 years old or whatever it is, 8 years old. Suddenly they're becoming knights. They're being handed lightsabers, and they're being tasked to go out and lead armies or at least fight the Nihil in this sense. But I do have a question about like whether or not like it feels like something might have been taken away by that. I mean, again, I'm not saying they weren't ready at all, but Burryaga does it almost. I got the sense that Burryaga wasn't exactly on board with like, is this the right thing? But for Bell, this is an opportunity, right? Outside of the fact that he finally gets the title of a knight, he's coming at this as though, okay, since we're knights, we have more free agency in what we want to go, what we do with our time, right? And so this kind of benefits him, and it plays into his obsession of finding Marchion Ro, getting back at them, making them pay for everything that happened. So I just feel like you probably have two viewpoints, two different perspectives about from two people that were, grew up essentially together and have been through a lot, literally through together. I think you still got Burryaga, who's a little bit more hesitant, a little bit more cautious about, is this really the right thing? But I want your thoughts on whether or not does it take anything away from what they did in phase 1 to finally get here.
I don't think it takes anything away, but I could see it feeling a little bit less special with the way that this happens because it's not like, your master that you've been with for years who knows you well has evaluated you and determined that you're ready. in both of their cases, they've both lost their masters. They're both just kind of like, well, we did all this stuff. We survived all this crazy stuff. They're making us be knights. Okay, we'll go with it. Rather than probably what they originally dreamed of one day happening, of their masters actually going through that process with them. So I could see it feeling a little bit less special just the way that it goes down. But I don't think it takes away from anything because, I mean, they both still did some really incredible things in phase one.
Yeah, no, it's true. They did so much that there was no question in mind. Like I think when I don't remember if it was when we wrapped up phase one or maybe in another one of the other shows that you and I did, or maybe it was with Jonesy. I think we were like, okay, just make him a knight already. Like he's ready, right? I mean, he's
Yeah.
gone through so much. I don't think that takes anything away. It is
Yeah.
just I am curious as to why Burry had a different perspective on this, but he's probably more in tune with his own personal feelings than somebody like Bell.
Well, and I could just see him being like, I imagined that this would be different and that it would feel different than the way that it is now, but so much has changed that this is, like maybe he knows he's ready in a logical sense, like he knows that he's done everything he needs to do, but then maybe he's having a hard time getting past the fact that it feels different than he thought it would.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Okay, so we get to now. What is this? 4 months after the fall, and we leave with Bell saying, "Hey, I've got a lot of work to do now. Now that they've become Jedi Knights," and we kind of see where this goes and where it leads to almost immediately. So now we're 4 months away from 4 months after the fall of Starlight Beacon, and he's essentially become obsessed with Marchion Ro. Like again, I hate to use the analogy, but it is the white whale. He's obsessed with trying to find Marchion Ro. This plays into Eye of Darkness in a lot of ways with the storm wall and the work that they're doing on the perimeter of the storm wall. All of that gets set up here as well. So this does play into again what the extra liberties that he has as a Jedi Knight, where had he not been knighted, he would have been stuck as a Padawan and still be trolling around with the master assigned to him and not really getting kind of to do what he wants to do, right? Not following his own path, if you will. But yeah, I mean, he's really at this point kind of consuming anything and everything, all the information that he can about Marchion Ro, about the Nihil patterns, all this stuff. And some of this pays off for him later on in Eye of Darkness, so it's not wasted, but it does seem like it is a little too much, a little too severe. And Burryaga is picking up on this. In fact, he goes a little bit later, not to jump too far ahead, but he goes and speaks up about this. But I guess this is where I feel like he's basically doing what Elzar is doing, and he's doing
Yeah.
what other Jedi are probably doing in this time, because they are panicking, they are afraid, and it's leading them to break some of those foundational elements of a Jedi, given into the fear, given into the anxiety, and with this, suddenly attachments become stronger, personal feelings play into this, right? You start wanting revenge. It just feels like, again, there are a lot of red flags. Doesn't feel like this is going to play out very well for somebody like Bell in the long run. I hate to even think about that, but I don't know. It feels
Well,
weird.
yeah, I mean, I that leads me to a question I wanted to ask you. I mean, what you mentioned about the obsession and Elzar and all of that. Do you think that there's a good chance that Bell is going to go down the same road that we saw Elzar go down in phase one? Well, and Elzar, he might not even be totally done with that road. We don't know for sure yet, but at
I,
least with what we saw so far.
yeah, I think having Burry there is probably a good counterbalance to keep him in check and keep him in line to make sure that doesn't happen. And we see that clearly in this episode or this issue, and we see it some examples, I think, in Eye of Darkness. That said, we have to. I had said that if there was, I had called it after I think it was Rising Storm. I said the person that's going to kill Marchion Ro, and I could be completely wrong, but the person that will kill Marchion Ro, like physically kill him, is going to be Bell Zettifar. And that's before we got to this whole, I'm going to make them pay kind of thing. But I just felt like poetically that would be the right person to do that, given that Loden Greatstorm died the way he died in that horrible, tragic death that we got in there. I felt at the time that became suddenly very personal to Bell Zettifar. And because it's personal, it does play into attachments. And although he's not as, I would call him, as rogue as, like, I don't feel he's as rogue as somebody like Elzar Mann, and that's probably not a fair word to use for Elzar, but the
I mean, I
potential's
think
there.
it fits.
Okay, well, let's use it.
Yeah.
I think he has the potential and the capacity to go down that path. it feels like, again, it got checked a little bit because Burry's now here, but it's not going to take much for him to kind of go back into that, especially if he starts losing more and more people around him. Somebody like Indira Stokes, I mean, he's going to fly off the handle if he loses Ember, right? And Marchion's Ro or whatever,
I'm
his
gonna fly
hands.
off the handle
Well,
if he
yeah,
loses them.
we
They
all
can't do that.
well, you say that. Um,
No,
I
Albert.
it's going to be like
No.
Marchion Ro with his little Nameless on his side, and the Nameless and Ember are going to be going at it, and Ember kills it, but then she dies in the process or something like that, right? Some tragic,
No,
horrible
don't even take it back.
warrior's death. But yeah, so like I guess what I'm saying is he is fragile. I think he is tempted to do more. I mean, he's even using the words like making them pay, right? There's a sense of revenge there. So again, the potential's there. I think the risk is there that somebody like Bel Zettifar could go down that same path that we saw with Elzar Mann. And Elzar was lucky that he had somebody to kind of rein him in, right? And they put him through the whole thing where they sent him off to whatever that planet was, and he was working to kind of make himself better. I don't know. I don't think they have time for that, right? They're not going to have time for that. They're in the middle of a war. They're in the middle of a crisis. So I don't think he's going to be given some of these benefits that Elzar Mann was given to kind of bring him back to the light, recenter him.
Well, it's possible that nobody, I mean, with Elzar, people noticed. With Bel, people might not notice. People are getting pulled in too many different directions.
True. Yeah. So we got a speculation in the channels. Let's see. One Up versus CPU says, I think the person who kills Marchion has to be his follower or something, like how Marta killed the mother and Marchion killed the dad. So maybe Bel joins Nihil undercover. That happened already. We had who was it that went undercover in the comic book during phase 1? Forget who it was. Oh, it was Keeve Trentis, right? She went undercover as a Nihil in phase 1. So they've kind of done that already, but I guess they could still do it again. Jeff says, I hadn't even thought about Ember dying until just now. How dare you? Oh, sorry.
I've definitely thought about it. Unfortunately, I've been concerned about that for a while.
Yeah, I mean,
hopefully
Circle
it won't
of Life.
happen. Hopefully it's not Circle of Life if she gets killed by the leveler. That is different.
I just meant death comes to us all. That's all.
Well, let's not open that can of worms right now.
But I mean, if you want to evoke like an emotional thing, not only for the readers, but certainly the characters like Bel, I mean, that's a trigger point.
I mean, if something's going to send him to the dark side, that'll definitely do it. No question.
Yep.
And I wouldn't really disagree either.
Yeah. It'll be John Wick in space or in Star Wars, right? The revenge that he seeks on for having killed his dog. If you watch John Wick, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. So we've got, let me go back to what's going on here. Burryaga's, and you can kind of see, this is only the only picture that I was able to grab where he definitely has this look of concern on his face, and he wants to help him. Burryaga wants to help him, but he's like, I've got other stuff I got to get done. And this almost, he's got some really good stuff that he does, which I think I got here in the next slide. Now it's a little bit later, but Burryaga doesn't, he's not there to help Bel, right? Bel's kind of on his own at this point. He's going to start looking for Marchion Ro, and Burryaga is going to go back and kind of do his own thing. But there is enough between that conversation, something's not sitting well with Burryaga, and so therefore he then goes out and seeks Pri Vitar, and basically tells him like, hey, Bel's not doing really well, and he's getting kind of, I wouldn't say crazy, but he's doing things that are sending red flags for me. And Vitar like acknowledges as much and is like, okay, yeah, he's basically has an idle mind. He wants what a lot of the Jedi want, but right now we have to just wait, right? We pulled everybody back because we need to wait. We can't just go, gallivanting throughout the galaxy when these Nameless are out there. We need a good strategy, and where the hell's Yoda at? But they're trying to plan something, and that is, is kind of why he's justifying it, or at least he's explaining to Burryaga that in time he'll come around. Like, just give him time, he'll do it. And of course, this doesn't happen. But I guess anything you want to add on here about the conversation, the initial conversation with Vitar?
Well, I do have a question for you. So I mean, we see Burry trying to help Bel, seeking help for Bel. We see him recognizing that Bel is struggling. Do you have any thoughts as to why isn't Burryaga going through the same thing? I mean, him and Bel are at a pretty similar point in they were at a pretty similar point in their training, pretty similar point in their knighthood. Burryaga has also lost things to the Nihil. I mean, he had a horrible experience at the bottom of the ocean because of the Nihil. Why do
Yeah.
you think that Burryaga isn't as angry?
I think it comes down to just their, I hate to say like their upbringing, but just their kind of moral compass, how connected they are with the light. And I'm not taking anything away from Bell. Um, you know, I they both lost their master, right? They both lost their masters, and Bell says as much in the comic. We both lost our masters to the Nihil. Bell says that to kind of get Burry to come on board of like, hey, you're in the same boat with me. But Burryaga steps away and is like, no, that's not really what I want to do, because I don't know. I just feel like he might have been brought up better. He can see that this is really not the path of the Jedi. He's able to kind of see that, right? We've seen other examples in the High Republic and other Star Wars stories where someone is able to be the kind of voice of reason, or to kind of be that conscious to say, hey, this is not really the right thing. You're going down a path I can't follow, kind of thing. Um, but I think maybe it's just the tragedy, the trauma that Bell has with how his master died. Having lost his master first off, right, and then finding him in the condition that he was in, where he had been tortured, they had cut off his leku, and then to be reunited, only to just minutes later suddenly have him and watch him die this horrific death. I just think a lot of that trauma, I think he carries more trauma as a result of the Nihil's actions and somebody like Burry. Again, I'm not taking anything away from what Burry went through, but I think a combination of his character and then just maybe not having witnessed some of this stuff or having gone through the exact same level of trauma that somebody like Bell has is probably enough to have not pushed him over the edge. And the empathic portion of Burryaga probably has something to do with that as well, right? We know he's able to kind of connect with people, and he can sense certain things about people without necessarily speaking to them. That's part of his powers, or where he's really stronger in the Force. So maybe that plays into it as well. And I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing now, but that's what I think. Yeah.
I mean, also the fact, I mean, just to add on to what you said, Bell is also blaming himself, which probably adds another layer on to the complicated emotions that he's trying to deal with. Is whether he's actually at fault or not, that can be debated, but he feels like he is.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff says it's possible Burry having that near-death experience and struggle has made him more appreciative of life in that Jedi way. Bell has just seen it. Survivor guilt, maybe Burry has lived it. So yeah, there could be an aspect of that as well, right?
Yeah.
Just different paths that they've gone through, even though they have a lot of things similar that have happened to them. Okay, so and I don't think I've got. Maybe I do. Let me see here if I have the picture on there. But yeah, so this is where Vader's telling Burry, hey, yeah, he'll do fine just on his own. Don't worry about it too much. And so Burry goes back to his day job that he's got right now, which is really cute. Like he's taking care of younglings. This is what he's been
super fun.
assigned to do. Yeah, he's doing he's got the iPad right there. Everybody's on an iPad. They're he's drawing and stuff. And it's funny, like and I think I got a picture of the drawing here, but he actually draws a picture of Bell Zettifar on his little iPad. And the thing about the picture, and we'll see a change in this a little bit later, but consciously or subconsciously, however it is, he drew Bell distressed. Hopefully they did a good enough job. In the comic, it clearly says that this is how he was drawn. I don't know if that comes across to you in the drawing that you see, but he definitely is channeling a lot of the anxiety and the worry that he's feeling for Bell Zettifar in the drawing. And that's when he realizes, okay, I need to do more. Like I can't leave him out there. He's going to go even further off into that deep end. And so I probably should be there with him, even though I don't agree with what he's doing. The safest place for him, the safest place for Bell is with me, kind of thing. But is that how
Yeah.
you interpreted that?
Yeah, and I was kind of laughing at this because I'm like, wow, he's a good artist because he drew him from memory and it looks just like Bell. I mean, that's
Yeah.
impressive. But yeah, and then the youngling says, why did you draw him mad? So, yeah, I do really feel for Burryaga in this moment though, because he seems like this is really what he wants to be doing, is working with the younglings. That seems more like a better fit for him, but he doesn't feel right leaving his friend. And so, he feels very pulled in different directions. So it is sad that he has to kind of choose between, these two paths when one of them is what he wants to do and the other one is more just what he probably feels like is the right thing to do.
Yeah. All right, so we flash forward now 6 months after the fall of Starlight Beacon. And at this point, Bell and Vitor, Vitor has actually gone out to Bell and said, look, the Nihil have the occlusion zone up. There are skirmishes that are going outside the border. We need a task force to head out there and start, figuring out what we can do to help. And so they've partnered with the Republic. So Vitor has brought Bell along because he feels like, hey, Bell just needs something to do, right? He's just sitting here, obsessing about Marchion Ro, getting angry. And so the best thing for him is to get out there and just do something, feel like he's making a difference in some way. And so Vitor takes him. Burryaga shows up as well and is like, hey, take me too. So Vitor, Bell, and Burryaga are heading out on this kind of first mission with Admiral Kronara, who shows up in the Eye of Darkness novel. And they're going to head out to one of these little, planets that is being attacked and being raided or whatever by the Nihil. And we have a cool little moment here where we find out that in that month's time when Bell or Burryaga left, Bell decided to cut off all his locks. Right, you can see him. He'd already got his Padawan braid cut off, but he went high and tight on his haircut. And then Burryaga redrew the picture of Bell Zettifar and tried to drew him happy. And of course, Bell sees this, and you can see it here. He says, that makes me happy, kind of thing. So, signaling that there's, a different approach coming from Burryaga here to as far as like what he wants to do to help Bell at this point.
He drew him with the ponytail, which I find interesting because I too liked the ponytail better.
Well, I don't think he knew. Well, yeah, and I don't think he knew that Bell had, cut his hair off, and so he drew him as he last seen him, as he last saw him.
Oh, okay, I get it. So he tried to, I guess he tried to make it better from the angry drawing.
Right.
Is that how you interpreted that?
Yeah, yeah. And then when he got there, he was just as surprised to see that Bell had cut all his hair off. You had said something too about like there's enough examples now in Star Wars where somebody goes through I hate to say this because it sounds trivial, but they go through like a haircut. Or they cut their hair, and there's something significant about it, right? It's almost, I don't know, I haven't put a lot of thought into it, but the shedding of it, the one that comes to mind first is, Kanan and his ritual that he went through. We got to see that same kind of Jedi ritual redone with Sabine in the Ahsoka series. But there's something about shedding. There's almost something symbolic or significant about shedding who that person was, and now this is a new version of that person for the Jedi. And I may be looking too much into it, but it feels that way anyways.
No, I definitely feel like cutting your hair is, I mean, a lot of times I feel like even in just like other fantasy stories and in myth and things like that, cutting your hair off is like a symbol of transformation, I feel like. So when I saw that Bell cut his hair off, it made me be like, oh, I wonder if this is kind of like a signal that like a big change within Bell is coming, whether it's for better or worse, I don't know. But
yeah, good point. Right.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the haircut it sounds silly, but I mean, you see enough examples of it. I definitely feel like cutting your hair is a symbol of transformation for sure.
Yep. So we get this point now, again, we're still 6 months away, but they're aboard the Third Horizon, which is what you see here. Really cool looking ship. I love the perspective that was drawn with this one. And they're in the Astronin orbit. Sorry, this is 9 months now after the fall. So 3 months after they decided to go out and start helping these planets and civilizations, cultures that are outside the occlusion zone. They head out in this ship, and you can see here in the right hand corner they've gone into another ship and landed on the surface, and they're talking to the mayor of this, who I think is Mayor McCheese, I think is his name.
Oh no, my God.
I'm kidding.
You had me going for a second.
I know how much you love
maybe
that.
it was McCheese.
It was not McCheese. That was from Mandalorian.
Oh my goodness.
He's the mayor of Astronin. And, they're sitting there talking about, hey, Mayor, we're here to kind of help you. It's interesting, too. Like, you brought this up, and I want to just kind of go back to it. We haven't talked about it, but, they're kind of walking a fine line with, hey, that if the Republic comes and asks them for help, they're like, oh, yeah, of course, we'll go out there and help. But it's not really clear what their role is. And in some ways, they kind of get the best of both worlds. Like, they get to say that they're there just in case something goes on. But I feel like the Jedi at this point are taking advantage of the fact that they are out there at the front lines, and the Nihil are there, and they are exacting revenge, or at least just getting justice for what happened. So they kind of have it both ways, where they are not necessarily warriors, but they can be warriors because they're in a war zone.
Well, yeah, if you're in a war zone and something happens and you need a skilled fighter to settle it, I mean, what are you gonna do? Like, not get involved? So, I mean, yeah, and they're saying Veter is saying before they go out there, he's like, "We're not there in a military capacity," and it's like, "Okay, well, we're gonna see how long that lasts," because I feel like by the time Eye of Darkness opens, and this isn't a spoiler, this is from the very beginning of the book. To me, it feels like a military setting that
Yeah.
they're at. So I don't know how it's supposed to not be military if you're behaving in a military-like way. I feel like they're just trying to have their cake and eat it too,
Yeah,
honestly.
it is. I mean, the gloves are off by the time we get to Eye of Darkness, right? And this makes sense because of, the stance that they take when we get to the Phantom Menace, and with what Mace Windu says, right? And Qui-Gon Jinn. So it all makes sense. I think that they're kind of prepping us and setting all that up here in this setting now.
Well, and I'm also thinking that the Republic might be kind of like a if you give a mouse a cookie situation where it's like, "Oh, well, you said you would come help us with the Nihil coming out of the occlusion zone. Well, now will you help us with this? Well, now what about this?" And then next thing you know, the Jedi have been militarized completely.
Right. They're in too deep. There's a point of no return at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you ever do children's book reading, you should start with if you give a mouse
Oh,
a
I
cookie.
love that book.
It's right on cue. Okay.
One of my favorites.
All right, and what you can't really see here, I think I don't know if I have a better picture here, but on the right-hand side, you can kind of see someone's looking through kind of some macro binoculars at Veter and the mayor of this planet or this town that they're in. And it turns out it's a Nihil. The Nihil were on here. They went in knowing the Nihil were somewhere around because there'd been a skirmish and they'd heard about it. But once they lock on to Veter, the Nihil are like, holy crap, that's Veter. He's like a grand master. This isn't like some run-of-the-mill, Jedi Knight. This is like somebody that Marchion Ro wants. And so this plays out more in the Eye of Darkness. You get a lot more context around what they're doing here. But he's after Jedi. He wants them captured. And to capture somebody like Veter, who's a grandmaster, they realize like there's a lot of money here and there's a lot of reputation and fame that can come if we can take him down. And so they immediately reach out to the Cacophony, which is Captain Shrike's ship. I don't remember if Shrike was mentioned in these comics. She comes up in Eye of Darkness. We get caught up with her in that one as well. So this is probably the first time I think we're seeing her, if I'm not mistaken. But
I believe so. Yeah, I know we get her backstory in Eye of Darkness and find out where she came from and why and all of that. But I think in the comics we just see her here.
yeah, so it's kind of cool to kind of see her almost as her first kind of comic book first appearance in this setting. And so, they send in the Cacophony, which is like this massive Nihil. It's a warship, basically. It's not like one of these little small, two-seater kind of things. I mean, this is a full-fledged warship that they send out here. And as you can see it right now. And so they're there on the surface of the planet and they realize, holy bananas, this is a warship that's just showed up. This is not just, a couple Nihil that were causing a ruckus on this town. And the next part is the one that I was the most excited about in this comic book, because we learn that in Rising Storm, there is a device that's being discussed in how it can nullify lightsabers and even nullifies blaster bolts. And we went for a number of, I think it came back up again in one of the middle grade books, if I'm not mistaken. I forget now.
It
which
did.
one, during phase 1.
Yes, I know
But-
that. I remember it did. Anyway.
but yeah, so they were talking about this weapon, basically the potential to build a weapon that would nullify lightsaber bolts and nullify blaster bolts. And when you couple that with the nameless, it's like, man, what do the Jedi have at that point? Like they're completely disarmed.
I
if
mean,
that
do you
was the case.
think that's too easy? Like, I mean, you don't have the Force and you don't have lightsabers. I mean, what can they even do in response to that?
Shonju? No, I'm kidding.
But no, you don't have the Force if they have the nameless.
True. Terrascasi? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. They're screwed. Pick up a blaster. I guess they don't have anything else. They can shoot a blaster. That's about it. But they're relegated to just the common, being in the galaxy if they don't have the Force and they don't have a lightsaber, right? So, but nonetheless, the ship shows up and they immediately fire this, which is now called the 4-7 lightsaber nullifier. That's the official term. It's somehow rigged to the Cacophony Shrike fires it, and this is right after they all three ignited their lightsaber. By the way, look at Burryaga. He's got like this broadsword lightsaber. His hilt is massive, as you can see there.
That's awesome.
But the minute they turn the lightsabers on, they fire that 4-7 nullifier, and Bel's and all three of the lightsabers are completely extinguished. Like they just turn off. Now, the thing about this is, the catch is, I think Shrike makes a comment about, hey, look, we can't keep this on for very long because it drains so much power. So there is a drawback to kind of keep it in check, because it does feel like it's a little overpowering, a little overpowered. And, you know, what would the Jedi be able to do if they were to weaponize this larger or make, you know, smaller versions and be running around with both nameless and, you know, portable lightsaber nullifiers?
There's got to be a weakness of some kind.
And I think
that was my issue with Marchion too. I'm like, he has to have a weakness.
Yeah, and I think that's what they were trying to explain here. I don't, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe there are other weaknesses, but it does sound like they can't keep. It's not sustainable to constantly have this thing on all the time. I imagine it's kind of like some field that has a radius, you know, and they just kind of hit the area, and that nullifies everything at that point. Or maybe just lightsabers. I don't know what they've done to it since then. We don't get a whole lot of details, but either way, they do that, and so they don't, you know, they no longer have any way to kind of fight back. And so Vader tells Bell and Burryaga to head back to the ship, go get support. This is not your fight. I got this. Don't worry, kind of thing. And Bell's freaking out, like, hey, you know, what if there's a nullifier? I'm sorry, what if there's a nameless as well? And this is where, oh, sorry, I kind of jumped ahead. Well, not technically, I didn't. Vader's last words to Bell are, hey, stop focusing on what if and start focusing on what is. In other words, to quote Qui-Gon Jinn, you know, be conscious of the present, but not at the expense, or be conscious of the future, but not at the expense of the present. It's the same kind of message that's being passed on here from Vader, because Bell is too worried about everything, all the possibilities that could happen here. And the one thing that Vader has, and that I guess maybe they're not aware of, or they're not considering, and we certainly get sense of it here, but he's got this kind of ancient form of martial arts called Shonju, which I have questions about this. Like, I don't remember this ever coming up before. I could be wrong. This may be the first time that we've seen it. It could be yet maybe a second form of combat, unarmed combat that takes advantage of the Force, similar to what we saw with Terrascasi. The closest thing, and I know you brought this up in your video, maybe they're trying to show us what excuse me, what Ezra used at the end of the Ahsoka series, where it is a combination of martial arts on top of using the Force to like send projectiles and be Force pushing, that kind of thing. So even though he doesn't have a lightsaber until a nameless shows up, he is armed with this the ability to use the Shonju kind of craft.
I just think that's so cool. I was excited that they used this, because I thought in Ahsoka when Ezra did that, it just got me so excited. It's just like one of those cool, like, awesome things that you love about Star Wars that just surprises you. I don't know. That's just the way that it hit me when Ezra did that in Ahsoka. So I loved seeing what I'm expecting was at least, maybe if Ezra wasn't doing exactly Shonju, I'm expecting that was like his inspiration for what he was doing, or at least kind of where he got the idea. So I loved it that was included here.
I do too. And now that they've kind of pulled this Band-Aid off, or at least opened the can, it feels like I do want to see it used again more, right? I want to know more about it, because I think Terrascasi has just been something outside of what we saw in Solo, right? In Solo, it was mentioned in there, and I don't technically, I don't think it was even mentioned. I think it was a novelization, and then in the visual guide that Kira had used it, right? She had been a practitioner of it, and that had been passed down from Darth Maul. That was the only time that we'd ever gotten a mention of Terrascasi, which was a Legends thing. So it'd be kind of cool to have both of them now, and then have Shonju show up again, either in this series or in future series as well. Just kind of having those two. Or maybe this is Shonju is just like another form of Terrascasi, or they're kind of one and the same. I don't know. Well, to be determined. Probably. I don't want to belabor this too much, but I just thought it was, to your point, I thought it was cool that there was something else that they had available to them. 1UP versus CPU. Maybe the Republic has someone make them a droid army to fight the Nihil.
Oh my gosh.
No, that story would never fly, man. Stop it. That's so dumb.
That's a dumb idea.
That's a dumb idea. Who would think of that? So, no, that's a good one.
History does repeat itself. So.
It does. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Yeah.
To quote George Lucas. All right. So you've got this guy, doing his best, Bruce Lee. He's whooping up on people with Shonju. And so the Nihil Shrike does what, is probably unexpected. She hits him with something called a repulsor weapon of some sort. This is something that I think you would hit a ship with, but because he's a grandmaster, like this is the only thing they really have to kind of really just put him down. And put him down, it does. Like when they hit him with this thing, I mean, you can see here, he's laid out and they're telling him not to move a muscle. And he's like, man, if I could move a muscle, I would. I can't, right? He's completely taken down by this weapon. Bell and Burryaga have already left, and the comic ends here. They capture Veter, and the fate of Veter does not come back up into Eye of Darkness, and it's chapter 13. So I'm already warning you right now.
Oh no, he's back on the chapter 13.
Chapter 13, Eye of Darkness. That's going to be a fun one to talk about. But yeah, you'll get to know exactly what happens to this Grandmaster Veter in Eye of Darkness, and it's pretty emotional, man. Pretty emotional. It's like one of the best moments, and one of the most disturbing, but one of the best moments. Okay.
Oh god.
That brings us to the end of that one. All right, let's talk about Shadows of Starlight number 4. I guess just quickly an opening on there's Shrike. I want to include a picture of her since we hadn't really seen her drawn out. So here's issue 4. This one there's not a lot that happens. Let's just be honest, and there's a reason why.
Yeah.
Why there's not a lot that happens.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting, interesting take on, the Nihil's perspective after Fall of Starlight Beacon, what they're doing, what they're not doing, and just kind of the perspective of Marchion Ro, and especially Gira Starros in terms of, what is she doing? Like, what is her role in all this? Because I think she surprised a lot of us just showing up and being as traitorous as she was during phase 1. This really starts to give you that context, and it's expanded upon greatly in Eye of Darkness to where she is kind of a main character in that book as well. Let me see. So yeah, we talked about, and so the first, I don't think I got it in the top left-hand corner, but the way when I mentioned earlier that it's written from like the perspective of the Nihil, it actually says the triumphant destruction of the Republic propaganda exercise and colossal failure known as Starlight Beacon. Like that's the caption that's in the top left-hand corner to the reader, right? That you would expect to be objective or just kind of informational, but it definitely has a propaganda spin. And a lot of those, almost all of them have some kind of a propaganda from the Nihil perspective, which I just really enjoyed. I love it. It's a fun way to kind of write this book and set it apart from the first 3 as well. Clearly Starlight Beacon's falling, which is kind of cool. And then on the right-hand panel, you can see this. It's like, okay, so if you're the Nihil and you're Marchion Ro and you just took down Starlight Beacon, you have plans to put up a storm wall and create your own Oculus Zone, kind of have your own part of the galaxy. I mean, what are you going to do at that point? The answer is pretty clear. We saw it telegraphed in all the books prior to this, and you're going to party. What I was not expecting was them to party as long as they party. Like, it's not a couple days. It's not a couple weeks. It is months and months of them doing nothing at all, but just relishing in the fact that they took the Starlight Beacon down and just partying, doing drugs, listening to rock and roll, right? Living that rock and roll lifestyle that you would expect Marchion Ro and the Nihil to live. The rec punk style.
Yeah.
That you would expect them to live.
And even the drawings are repetitive too. Like it's almost the same drawing just over and over and over and over again. So you definitely get that feeling.
Yep. You can see it right here. Like the fact that they're breaking the fourth wall, like they're taking either that or they're taking selfies or somebody's taking pictures. But in every one of these, as time is passing, like nothing is happening in this comic book. It's just images of this, like, it's like Tomorrowland, right? If you know what that is, it's like the largest EDM festival that's held every year. It's basically a big EDM festival, and weeks are passing, and you've got Marchion Ro doing nothing but sitting on his throne, watching as everybody is, doing crazy stuff. But then you've got these images where people are taking selfies or they're breaking the fourth wall and showing you how much of a great time they're having living this life of the Nihil. Because, yeah, I mean, it is similar to, the fall of the Emperor at the end of, Return of the Jedi, and how the galaxy celebrated for them, for the Nihil. This is everything that had been promised to them, everything that they've been working towards, and more. Because I don't think any of them had thoughts that in Marchion Ro's plans, they would carve out their own corner of the galaxy. And I mean that literally. If you can see in the bottom left-hand corner here on the right-hand side image, that portion in red, and we see it a little bit later and throughout the comic, I've got another image of it later. That is the section that they own of the galaxy. It's not small. Like I had no scale of like how much of the galaxy he had carved out with the the storm wall. But it is a pretty large and significant amount of space that they've carved out. So the Nihil, yeah, they've got every reason to party because this is going better than they had ever thought it would be.
I also find it interesting that everybody's partying and Markion seems to want it that way, but he's always just sitting on his throne. He never joins in.
Yep. Yep. I mean, he's, I'm trying to think if he did. He never did either in like Rising Storm, Fallen Star. He was there, but he was kind of all business. It always felt like there was still more to be done, and he was using that time to kind of think about what are my next steps. Like he never felt satisfied, and I don't think he's satisfied yet. And clearly he's not satisfied by the time we get to the last panel and last page of this comic, which we see more of that later.
I mean, but like 5 months is a long time to just sit around if you're not satisfied. Do you think
It's
he
about
just couldn't come up with what to do next?
well,
How do I top this?
yeah, well, I think that's a good segue to where Gira is, right? Because Gira is like, okay, hey, like initially she starts off here, Markion, I have a question for you, and you can see her. By the way, you had mentioned that you were not expecting her to be drawn as badly, and I mean badly as in a baddie kind of way that we see
Yeah.
here
I
originally,
totally pictured her differently in my head.
like a
That's why
librarian sitting in a chair with
yes, I just pictured her as like, I don't know, I pictured her like a senator. Like, what do you think of when you think of a senator?
Mon
Well, I mean,
Mothma or
Padme's a senator, so I mean,
yeah,
I don't
Padme.
know. For some reason, my brain had her pictured so different, and I was always like, "What is going on between the two of them? I don't get it." And then I saw this picture of her, and I was like,
Oh,
"Okay, this does kind of explain a little bit more."
yeah. Right. This wasn't Hillary Clinton in a two-piece power suit that I was
Thank
expecting. This is
you.
somebody
Thank
totally,
you.
totally different.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's, and she's working him, right? She's there for one reason. And when we get to Eye of Darkness, they kind of, and I don't think I have the whole thing. Yeah. When we get to Eye of Darkness, they get into this a little bit more. They explain kind of this relationship, and you get the sense that it is for one reason and probably one reason only, at least from Marchion Ro's perspective. But Gira Star Wars. I said that. I always do that. Gira Staros is looking at this differently. Her perspective is, hey, I've got an opportunity here to be more than a senator, right? And she even says as much in this. And there's a couple things that happen in this comic here that get established that play out in Eye of Darkness and play out even in the Marvel comics. I mentioned at the top of the show, I was reading those three. There are some callbacks to that we're seeing in this comic being set up. But for her, I mean, she is the ever opportunist, and that's probably not the best word to use right now, given what's going on with fandom. But she is. I mean, she's looking for an opportunity to move up through the ranks. She kind of wants to have all the power, and she sees that Marchion Ro, as good as he is as a strategist and combatant, he's really not about what. I mean, that's not sustainable. That's not going to be enough to keep things going, right? You got to have an infrastructure in place. You got to impose some level of government politics. There's got to be teams and groups. There's a lot because it's a huge part of the galaxy that's been carved out now for them. It's only a matter of time. If they do nothing, it will only be a matter of time before that starts to shrink. And the Republic and the Jedi find ways to get in there and do something about it. And she sees this partying that's going on for weeks and months on end as like just it's ignorance. Right. It's lack of maturity. It's lack of understanding about what it means to rule, what it means to be a leader and to have your own kind of nation. There's a lot of the busy work that needs to go in it. And this is her bread and butter, right? She comes from that background. She's been well brought up and well versed in what it means to run a republic, what's necessary in order to run a government. And she's trying to get Marchion Ro on board with this, but he's kind of like, yeah, it's not really what my plan is. That's not really what I want to do. But if you want to do it, yeah, go right ahead.
I do. Okay. I know that Gira is an opportunist, but I do not understand why she is still here because I see this stuff happening and I'm like, what is she getting out of this? I feel like she's not getting anything out of this. Like,
I,
what's in it for her?
I think it's ultimate power. Like I think in her and I don't know, and even with well, shoot, I don't want to speculate too much or say much because I might bleed into Eye of Darkness, but I think she's coming at this from the perspective of I can have Marchion Ro, if he'll let me, Marchion Ro can continue to kind of dominate the galaxy, right? But the true power lies in who rules over the people. Like he does enough to get people on board and to execute a lot of the strategies and the battles and all that stuff. But the only thing that really truly keeps people engaged and involved and that sustainability is going to come from somebody who's the actual ruler, the people, the person that is of the people and speaking of the people. Like that part of her is still in her. Marchion Ro doesn't care. Like that, he has no sense of that. Like he's not even probably capable of one, understanding what that means, or two, executing upon that. Like I can't see him. We've seen his leadership style. I mean, he encourages them to kill each other. He kills people at will because he doesn't like what they are wearing or what they look like, or he feels like they double cross them. It's very Sith-like in that approach, where she's coming at this more of like, hey, you know, the true power lies in someone that can continue to lead people and make them want to be a part of this group, because eventually they're all going to leave, and unless we do something about this. So I think for her, all that long-winded answer, I think the short answer is, I think she just sees it as there's an opportunity for her to be kind of at the highest level, but not really be involved in the combat and the war. She'll leave that up to this guy to do, and she kind of benefits from all of that.
I guess I'm just kind of like, why leave the Republic then?
I don't, I don't think she saw a future there. I think she probably this was probably a fast and easy way to get a lot of power really quick. And it feels like because of the politics of the Senate, it probably was going to be a long burn. She'd have to play the long game to move up. And here it's like she's one person removed from, or one person next to, however you want to look at that, as having a lot of power. And that would have been years in the Republic for her to kind of climb up the ladder and get as close to her as she was.
I guess that's a good point. I guess I just kept running into like she joined the Nihil, and then she complains about how she doesn't like the Nihil. And it's like, this is the Nihil. Like you joined them. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's going to become more clear with time, and then I'll kind of, I don't know, get that straightened out in my head. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Dang it. Jonesy's not here, so I'm going to have to edit this show. I think she's coming at this from I can fix him kind of perspective, or I can fix this kind of perspective, or I know what he doesn't know, and he's going to see the value in that, and he's going, it's going to be him and I throughout all of this.
Okay.
I don't want to say any more than that, because we know where that goes when we get to Eye of Darkness. So
I could see that. Yeah. She's like, once I tell him how this all works, he's going to be so grateful, and he's totally going to want to do it this way.
I want to say something, but yeah, because that's exactly what happens in Eye of Darkness, and we get to see what the fallout of that is, and it's kind of hilarious. But I won't say any more than that. So, but yeah, I think that's her perspective. That's the angle that she's coming at here. So there's the close up on the galaxy and kind of the section that's been carved out by the storm wall and the storm seeds that they put in place. And then, there is a lack of frustration that, of course, it's kind of growing with Ghirra Starros on all of this. And then we jump about like 2 months later, she's sitting there talking. Did I capture this? Let me see if I got it here. I don't think I did, but she's like coming in and she's trying to like, oh, you're so powerful, you're so strong. It starts off that way. She's trying to persuade him in that way. By the end of it, she's like, get off your butt and do something. Like, this is ridiculous. We're going to lose, right? They're going to win. They're going to beat us if we don't do something now, here and now. And that finally, at that point, that's when Ro is like, okay, let's go do something. And you can see him here. I forget that guy's name in the background. I don't think I wrote his name down, but this is in response to Ghirra basically saying, look, you can either be part of history or you can write history. You have all the ability, all the power to do so. It's just a matter of whether or not, you want to go through with it. And what she mentions is that, and what really catches his ear is the fact that that we are now hearing that there are pockets of rebellions starting to form behind the Stormwall, right? In his own space, to quote Andor, pockets are fermenting. There are groups of people, they're starting to coalesce and coming together. And Ro's like, holy crap, wait a minute. No, okay, now I don't want that to happen, right? This is exactly what, she was talking about, even though I wasn't listening. But he wants to put a stop to this. He does not want these, an insurrection of sorts from people, which is where Ghirra has been coming from. Like, if all they did is attack planets and plunder them and enslave people, they're going to create rebellions, and they're going to create insurrections. But if they actually come at this from we're a legitimate, government, or in a legitimate galaxy, mini galaxy or whatever, and there are reasons for people to be here, and we're not just enslaving them, and we're treating them like civilians, and we truly are living by what does he call it? The free zone. Like, they have a name that they call their area, which is I forget the name, but it implies
free space.
I think it's like free space or something like that. But it implies that, like, hey, we're all free and you can do whatever you want. And that's not what's been happening, right? The Nihil are still taking advantage and plundering these planets within the occlusion zone. And so that's where Gira is coming from. But Marchion Ro is starting to see this now. He's starting to realize that, okay, there are these pockets of rebellions and insurrections that are starting to happen. He doesn't want this to spread like a plague. He doesn't want this to get any larger. And so he decides that, it's time to kind of do something about it. And so he starts with this planet. It's called Saramo. And the caption is Saramo, a pathetic planet making a pathetic attempt to resist Nihil rule. Again, that's the bubble that was captured. More of the propaganda there in that section. And so, he wants to send a message, basically. He wants to go down to this planet, send a message, let that propagate to the rest of his space, his galaxy, and even beyond that, so that people know that, hey, you go down this path, it's going to be short-lived for you. So they go to the planet and they decide they're going to go ahead and start this kind of a war. And I'll kind of speed through this a little bit more. But what they weren't expecting was there was on this planet, there is someone named General Vice. General Vice is a character that we've talked about when we covered The Blade. We talked about it. She comes up again in the Eye of Darkness. We get to see a really great story between her and Porter Engle. But what we find out is she's retired. And she's actually on this planet that Marchion Ro is going to, that wants to set an example for. And the mayor, or the person that's running this planet, reaches out to General Vice and is like, hey, the Nihil are here. We need your help. And her conditions are, look, I'll help you guys. However, I get to take complete control of your planetary defenses. I have complete and utter, ultimate control of your army, all of your forces, all of the turrets, the guns, no questions asked, right? You came to me for help. I've done this before. I'm a general, whatever else. But those are my conditions. And they kind of give into it, and they're like, okay, that's fine. What they weren't expecting, though, and this is where I think the comic did a really good job of kind of putting a twist on this, because you probably knew if you read Blade of Bordeaux, or The Blade, honestly, but she actually turns against them. And again, as an opportunist, she turns on this planet, fires their own cannons against them, and puts them in a position of not being able to defend themselves against a Nihil. Then contacts Marchion Ro and is like, hey, I want to be a part of your team. Right. And Marchion is questioning, like, why should I believe you? This is kind of weird. But there's something about her approach that certainly, resonates with Marchion Ro. Like, this is exactly the way Marchion Ro works. Like, he likes this whole, everybody cutting each other's throats and trying to move up the ladder. It's very, very much in the spirit of who the Nihil are at this point, at least in Marchion Ro's eyes. And so he allows her to kind of come on board and be part of, his team. And this is why, to kind of fast forward, we pick up in Eye of Darkness, where now she is on Marchion Ro's side. But this is kind of a backstory of sorts, where we kind of get to see what we do. We get to see where General Vice was left after the events of Blade, and probably the sequel series of that comic, and how she gets pulled back into this everlasting battle, one-on-one fight with Porter Engle. So I know I'm trying to fast forward because we're going a little bit long here, but that's kind of we'll get to the very last piece of here, but that's kind of where General Vice plays into all of this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I mean, he does kind of need her too, because he needs help controlling all of this territory that he has. And she has a reputation as a Jedi hunter. And I think, doesn't at one point she show the lightsabers or something?
Yeah, she opens
So,
up her jacket and she's got him hanging there like General Grievous has.
right. So, like, she's got a reputation. She can prove it. And he needs her. He needs someone who knows what to do with Jedi, because, I mean, he has the Nameless, but other than the Nameless, I mean, the Jedi are still running around in Nihil space, kind of doing whatever they want. So he needs someone who can hunt Jedi. He needs someone who can help him. So yeah, I mean, I think he respects her, but he also needs her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, that whole Jedi Hunter name or tag is enough, is just like icing on the cake that she has some experience in hunting down Jedi and killing Jedi, which we still don't know like where that story goes and where that comes from. We just kind of take it at face value that she has, and clearly she does. I mean, she's got a lot of lightsabers, so you have to kind of believe that she is that person. It's funny, she calls this her that whole exchange and that exercise with her turning against the group there, the people that had hired her. She calls that her audition, right? It was her audition to Marchion Ro to be a part of his team. And then she goes and he's like, when he asks her, hey, why did you do this? She actually flatters him and says, I know a winner when I see one. And so he's just kind of like eating this up and like, oh yeah, this person's like great. I need to get them on board.
Yeah, the flattery didn't hurt either.
No, not at all. And there's General Vice right there. She's kind of slitting the throats of everybody that were around her on that planet. Here's the battle that started, right? She turns the cannons on the forces that were behind the wall, kills all of them. There's that caption there. Consider it an audition. And then she said, Marchion Ro says, "Welcome to the Nihil, General Vice." Okay. And then we get into, I think, your favorite moment. Yep. So this is, we're now on Hetzel, which is, the caption says Hetzel, which is so crazy. I love the fact that they went to Hetzel, and this is where if you don't know, this is where Marchion Ro's headquarters are now. This is where they've kind of set up base, and it's, almost kind of sick that it was where that very first battle where, Avar Kriss took the title of Hero of Hetzel, right? But
they definitely did that on purpose to bum everybody out. Yeah.
It's a pretty big downer for those of us that love that portion of the book and what happened on Hetzel. But it says the glorious capital of the Nihil free sectors, former planetary parliament, current Nihil mega fortress, and then 5 months after the fall of Starlight Beacon. So, and there is an Ithorian that has, it's Marchion Ro, and I forget who the other person is. Maybe it's Vice, I forget now. But they're going through and looking at like people that had been captured by the Republic that were now behind the Stormwall, and trying to see like who's in these prisons, and is there anybody here that we can use, or anybody that can give us an advantage. Again, all part of being able to kind of butt up against the emerging resistance, the emerging rebellions and insurrections that potentially could be happening. And they find Bulan. This is a green Ithorian. He's been locked up by the Republic. And they go and Marchion Ro recognizes him, which they don't really explain, but there's something macabre about him, which you would, or did they explain? Sorry, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I don't think they explained it, but the way that I interpreted it is that he was known for being locked up, for doing something disturbing, for being a mad scientist. Like, I don't know if they ever explain it fully, but I do think that it was just kind of assumed that this guy was just known by people.
Yeah. And that's right. Like, he has a reputation, and Marchion Ro is aware. I think because of his reputation, which we'll talk about here, it makes sense that somebody like Marchion Ro would have heard about him and probably had his eye on him. The minute he saw him, he thought, okay, this is definitely somebody I need to have in my ranks first, because he's going to help with some of my bigger, larger plans, initiatives that I got going on. So they go visit Baron Bullion in jail, which is what he wants to be referred to as the Baron. And when they get into his cell, like you can see it on this second caption that's floating by here, or second panel that's floating by, they get into his cell, they look at it, and he's kind of laying there, and all over the walls, this guy has been sketching out plans, ideas. You can see it looks like a Twi'lek of some sort, but then it's got like 3 cybernetic eyes, right? So he is a mad scientist. He delves and has made a life of going in and doing some really horrible things to people, to beings, for the sake of science or for his own sick endeavors, whatever the case may be. But this is all, good stuff for Marchion Ro. And so he wants to, so Bullion says that he knows about the Nameless, and he feels like the Republic had always restricted his progress. Like, he wasn't really able to go and do the things that he wanted to do in the name of science, or in the name of his macabre experiments, the stuff that, the craziness in his head. And so that's why he was locked up. Like, again, they don't get into details, but you do get the sense that this is kind of like this Hannibal Lecter, Jeffrey Dahmer kind of psychopath that it's also very brilliant and is doing horrible things and experiments on beings. And Ro's like, okay, when can you start? Right? I mean, this is exactly what I need. And so they get him out of the jail, and he wants him to kind of help him out with the Nameless. Right? There's something about the Nameless that he wants him to help out. I don't want to say anything more because this is covered in Eye of Darkness. So when you get to the book, this explains it, but they're kind of laying down the seeds here. But Bulin agrees to help Ro on the condition that he gets a ton of credits, that he has all the equipment at his disposal that he needs, that there is, he has a safe place to work, which I thought was kind of weird, that no disruptions.
Safe for him, I guess.
Yeah, maybe. He doesn't want any disruptions, meaning like he's going to be doing some crazy stuff already, right? And he wants be able to kind of do that stuff. And the last thing, which I thought was really cool, is he wants the Republic guards that imprisoned him, to be his very first subjects. So like it doesn't sound like he's going to do anything productive outside of just torture them for having arrested him. And that's what you see here as they're walking off. So it's kind of eerie. And it's kind of cool. I love this, the way it was written. But yeah, this guy he's a bad dude. And you'll get to know more about him in Eye of Darkness when we get to that book. Anything else you want to say about Bulan?
I mean, huh?
Why is he green?
I guess that's maybe an experiment went wrong. But no, I mean, I was just like, when all of those sketches on the walls and stuff like that, it made me be like, I do not want to know what he did to get locked up in there in the first place. Because, I mean, it must have been really bad, whatever it was. So I hope I never find out. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I don't know that we will find out. He does enough in the next couple in the book, and I'm sure he'll do more in the comic series here for us to get a good sense of who he is, more than we want to. Okay. So the last part of this, we're back on Hetzal, and we're less than a week, we're a week away from the anniversary of the fall of Starlight Beacon. And at this point, you've got Gira Staros, who's talking to Marchion Ro, and she's kind of talking about, now she's already set up basically three things, right? She set up these three pillars that we talked about, the three things she feels like are foundational for a government to exist. She creates the Ministry of Protection, and that is assigned to General Weiss. That makes sense. She's got the Ministry of Advancement, which is kind of a weird name, but that's been assigned to Bulan, so the crazy mad scientist. And then she has the Ministry of Information, which she is created and she's kind of running, right? That's the person that's in the know of everything. And then, as we see in Eye of Darkness, is the person that eventually is going to try to reach out to the Republic and try to establish some kind of a relationship with them, because they don't want to be seen as a joke. They want to be acknowledged as a true kind of real entity, a real group of people, and all the stuff that comes with that, right? In the eyes of the Senate and the Republic, she wants them to be legitimized in that way. And so she has created this position of Ministry of Information, which she is. She says they're all kind of they're all in a working state and they're coming along. And these are the things that, Marchion Ro is going to need in order to, be successful. And she tells Marchion Ro, it's not about conquests. It's not about destruction. It's about what you leave behind, right? It's, again, speaking to that legacy and leaving behind, how people are looking at you so that they don't turn against you at some point.
I just honestly do not think that she's in touch with reality, because why do you, like, the fact that she thinks there's even a chance of the Republic working with them and taking them seriously. I mean, they did a series of intense, large-scale terrorist attacks, ending with the biggest one possible. And then she thinks that they can just turn around and be like, okay, we're legitimate now take us seriously. Like, I just don't think that she's really thinking this through.
It's a super, super tall order. And I think George Mann does a good, I don't want to spoil anything, but when you get to Eye of Darkness, again, this is explored in greater detail. I think she does enough. Some of it is her own doing, but then some of it are just kind of the circumstances that exist and what she's able to do with the Republic. But you're right. Like, especially when the book starts off, like, she comes out of the gate saying, this is what I'm going to do. She kind of picks up where she's at here. And you're thinking, there's no way. Like, there's no way they're going to legitimize what's going on. And you got varying opinions and viewpoints in Eye of Darkness, where people are like, hell no. Like, who do they think they are, that they're going to sit there and suddenly want to be acknowledged as a legitimate, entity of sorts? And you've got other groups that are like, maybe it works in our favor, right? What's worth, keeping your enemies closer kind of thing, right? So there are different viewpoints, and it gets all explored in Eye of Darkness. And I won't spoil it here, but we do kind of understand, for the most part, the fate of where that goes by the end of the book. But it is something that plays out through the entire course of the book. So it's not something they kind of knock out and was resolved within the first 4 chapters or anything. It still goes all the way through the entire book.
Yeah.
So in the last pieces here are just kind of interesting, right? It's Marchion Ro, again, still sitting there. He seems very numb, very stoic, not really fazed by any of the stuff that Gira. I think Gira's talking about this stuff like, look at me, Marchion, right? My Marchion, look how wonderful I'm, look what I'm bringing to your galaxy now. And look at all the value that are getting. Here's why you need to keep me around. He seems so disinterested in all this stuff.
Yeah, he's kind of blowing her off.
He really is blowing her off, right? And then there's this, this little scene where there's a fly that kind of comes in. He grabs the fly and then he smashes the fly, which is what you see right here. And then after he's done that, like you can see the panels, like it's like from Halloween, the shape, right? The mask of Michael Myers. He's just lifeless. There's nothing going on. He's sitting there caught up in his own thoughts and his own whatever, even after everything that Gira had just said and after killing this poor little bug or whatever. And it ends with him basically saying, conquest, destruction, what I leave behind. Like that's all and then he's got, you can see Coruscant here. There's like a hollow of Coruscant in that map that they've been showing. And he takes his hand, he puts it over Coruscant, and then he kind of crushes it to kind of signify that that's all he wants. Like he is so simple. Like it's nothing has changed for him. Like we talked about this when Gira first approached him months ago about how we need to do something more than just kind of hang out and, do nothing. He hasn't changed. Like his whole MO is really just about death, conquest, and destruction. That's it. And he is a madman in that sense. He is a psychopath in that sense. We see more of that when we get to the Eye of Darkness book. But what I find really interesting and most intriguing is it kind of alludes to it here, and I won't take too much away from Eye of Darkness, but there's still something more this guy wants to do. Like he is not done. And maybe they're signifying that there's something more on Coruscant specifically, because they don't really cover this in the book so much, but maybe there's something specifically about Coruscant. I don't know where the end is for him, but it doesn't feel like he's been satiated. He's not done. There's still more plans. He's still got more death, destruction that he wants to execute on, no pun intended. But, the only thing he's going to benefit from what Gira is doing, but whether or not she does it or not, it really doesn't matter to him. And that's probably one of his shortcomings. Like he's not really thinking a lot of this stuff through, like you said. His overconfidence it probably runs in parallel with somebody like Palpatine and not really thinking through some of that. It doesn't seem like the master strategist, or at least thinking the long game on some of this stuff. But it's kind of eerie that this is who he is, and I don't know what's in store for the Jedi, but it's not going to be good. But especially going into the next wave of books that we have coming in Phase 3.
I almost wonder if his whole thing about just wanting to destroy and not really having much of a game plan I think he doesn't have a game plan for the long term, and I wonder if that's going to be what gets him in trouble. Is I wonder if he's going to kind of shoot too high, maybe actually go for Coruscant like this scene might be alluding to, and then fail in the process, and then that's actually going to be what bites him in the butt. I mean, I don't know, but I do feel like whatever is going to be his downfall, I think he's going to be the thing that sets it into motion, because there's got to be something wrong with him. Like he can't be this strong and like just untouchable.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And again, we get some of that Eye of Darkness, but the story's not over, of course, right? There's still more there that's going to happen. And it sounds like it is going to get worse before it gets better for the Jedi in the Republic. So, you're right. Like if they're alluding to that his end game, if you will, if he even has one, or at least maybe the next phase, or at least maybe it's not even an end game. He probably sits there and thinks about, oh, okay, what do I want to do now? Coruscant. Okay, let's go after Coruscant. And then is impulsive in that way. He may
Yeah.
overreach, right? He might overstep his, or overthink his, be too confident with what he can actually do in trying to conquer something like Coruscant. He also has to keep in mind he's making a lot of enemies across the galaxy. We talk a lot about talk about the Jedi. We talk about the Republic. You've got all kinds of other people that he's crossed over the years so far, and just his being never any the way he is, and kind of the reputation that he has there. But like somebody like Lorna D, not to bring this into it, but when we ended when we broke down Tempest Runner, well, there was something about Lorna D that kind of spoke to us in the sense that she could become like an anti-hero, right? And if there's any one person she wants to get revenge on, it's going to be somebody like Marchion Ro. So what I'm saying is he's creating a lot of enemies, and I don't think he's really got it. I don't think he's got a good grasp on just how wide this conflict could suddenly turn. And, without Gira Staros doing what she's doing, right? If that suddenly fails and that's kicked out from underneath him, then what does he have, right? He's gonna have a bunch of starships, and he's gonna have a bunch of people that are fighting, but it's not going to take long before they realize that there's nothing sustainable here. There's no long term. We can't constantly live like this, and they're going to start bailing. And that one by one, I think those cracks in the dam are going to break, or the chips are going to fall. And you're right, he's going to be left overreached and completely without enough power to really do much of anything outside of just succumb to the overgrowing pressure of the Republic and the Jedi. To kind of oversimplify that.
Well, and yeah, I guess with the Nihil, I mean, the same, like the actual people of the Nihil. I mean, the same issue comes up of what I was saying about Gira a few minutes ago. What's really in it for them? Not really a whole lot. And so eventually, I think all of that, it's just going to be too much. And it's just like you were saying, eventually that's going to start working against him.
Yeah. And that's what Gira's coming from. Like, in some ways, you can kind of see where she's coming from. Like, this is what we need to do. I know it's not sexy and it's not combat, and right, but if you want to rule, you can't just sit there and kill people all day long, right? If you were the only person, if you were Palpatine and you were the only person, there was nothing, no power that would be able to take you on, then maybe, right? Maybe that is sustainable for at least some period of time. But history has shown us that it isn't sustainable, and so you got to have something to give back to the people. They have to feel like they're invested in what's going on. If you're off plundering their stuff and killing them left and right, and waging war and setting them off to death, and there's nothing for them to gain from that, yeah, it's not going to be it's not a good formula for success, in Star Wars or even in the real world. So, all right, well, that's how the comic ends. I think that was the last panel I had on there. So yeah, but great book. All four of those issues. Again, if you haven't had a chance to read them, I think they're definitely worth reading, even though we kind of broke down pretty much everything in all four. Great stuff from Charles Soule. He never disappoints in his writing. I mean, everything he's done has been just top-notch stuff, and there's, he doesn't shy back from that level of creativity and writing with this comic in any way. So good stuff for that. And again, if it is required reading, in my opinion, for Eye of Darkness, only because it just gives you so much more to work with by the time you go into. Again, I still hold that George Mann does enough to give you the bits and pieces that you need for the story to make sense. But if you're like a completionist or feel like, hey, there's something missing, or you're reading this and going like, what happened here? You definitely want to come back and read this, as well as All Jedi Walk Their Own Path, because that really does flesh out everything, and it's everything you really need to know going into Eye of Storm. And I'm really glad they did this, because this wasn't originally planned, right? We talked about this when we covered issue 1. This wasn't originally the plan. They were just going to kind of jump into phase 3. And I think at some point, I remember Charles Soule talking about, like, when we took a step back and we're looking at it, we realized there was a lot of events, a lot of things that happened, and there's a lot of story there. There was a lot of potential to tell that. And so they did. And so I credit them for doing that and just executing the way they did, because it's a really great series to pick up.
Well, and the cool thing is that I feel like Eye of Darkness, it takes pretty much like everything that you and I talked about tonight and just carries it forward. So,
Yes. Yep.
I mean, this comic, it kind of just gets you started, and then Eye of Darkness takes all of these different plot lines and then fleshes them out a little bit more, gives us more details, carries them forward, all of that.
Yep. Well, all right. We'll end the show there. I want to say thank you to everybody that came out for the live feed tonight, especially Skywalker's Academy, my Star Wars guys. Jeff was here. We also had Ash that chimed in at one point. Navid, thank you for being here. I think that's the first time I remember seeing that name. Well, Alex snuck in at the very end. One Up versus CPU, and Music Train came in there at the very end. So again, if you guys are interested in, if you're not already a member of our YouTube channel, please go out to cantinacast.com/YouTube. Like, subscribe, sign up for all this stuff. We got a lot more coverage coming from the High Republic, as well as just about everything else coming out for 2024, whether it be books, comics, television series, video games. It's all getting covered here in some capacity. So, and don't forget to check out Lauren's videos too. Jedi Novel Archive. She has a lot of if you're into the literature and you kind of want high level overviews that are still more in depth, 35, 45 minutes in length. She does a great job with just about everything that's come out here in the last, 2 years now, I think you've been covering? Year and a half?
Yeah. Yeah, like a year and a half, which is
Right.
crazy. It doesn't feel like that long.
Time flies. Yeah. So check it out. Check out all the archive videos there as well. Last thing, quick reminder, this Sunday, we've got 2 shows. We've got Waystation, where we're going to be looking at 2024. And then we're also going to be, Jonesy and I are going to be talking about the just recently announced Mandalorian movie set to be written and directed by Jon Favreau. We'll do that Sunday night for our Patreon members. So if you want to listen in on that or watch the live stream, head out to cantinacast.com/Patreon, sign up for that. And again, you've got a whole mess of episodes that have been in Patreon exclusives for years. So there's a ton of stuff there too. But all right, any final words, any final thoughts before we get out? Hey, Rocky's back.
Yeah, Rocky's been sitting back there. I've been nervous about if he's going to do anything crazy, but he's been being good. So
He's been pretty good. Yeah, we haven't seen you scream in terror after you ripped your leg or anything. So
yeah, I didn't expect him to be involved in this at all, but I guess when I started talking, he was like, "What's going on in here?" So
yeah, I want to see.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, Rocky, thanks for being here as well. Okay, guys, we'll see you all here in just a few days.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.